Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. Today, we are talking to attorney Joseph Nivin. As usual, on a Friday afternoon, what better way to cap off the week than with some advice on family law cases in New York City. Today, we'll be talking about a really interesting subject that I had actually never thought of, but I can see there's a lot of reason for this. What if I want to become a foster parent to a relative's child? Is that right? That's what we're doing today, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I want to welcome you back to the show and back to being live on Facebook and on the rest of the social media platforms. Today we're going to start off with talking about a relative's child starts off, they get placed in foster care. And could I be a foster parent as a relative of this child?
Absolutely. And in fact, there's a preference for placing children who enter foster care with relatives.
Oh, great. And let's back this up a little bit because I didn't see a question on this, but what would just some of the circumstances be around a child being placed in foster care?
Well, there's a very wide range of things that could end up with the child being placed in foster care. Some of the most common is drugs. There's also use of excessive corporal punishment, physical abuse, which is more severe. It could be sexual abuse. It could be failure to provide a safe and sanitary home. It could be medical neglect. It could be domestic violence in some cases. The agency is not allowed to remove a child from somebody just because one parent is a victim of domestic violence. But if there's domestic violence and also the victim did something that independently would constitute abuse or neglect, then the child can be placed in foster care.
Wow. Those are all very scary circumstances. And for a child to be taken out of their home and put into a situation where they don't know the foster parent, that could be even scarier. So it's really nice that they have an opportunity to possibly live with someone that they know and can take better care of them.
Right.
So could I also be considered if I was just a close family friend?
Yes. Very often what's called the kinship resource also includes a close family friend. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who the child is biologically related to.
Okay, so what is typically involved in the process of becoming a foster parent, and what's involved? I mean, is there an investigation?
Yes. So the agency would, first of all, do a record check to make sure that the potential foster parent doesn't have any prior history of abuse or neglect on their own. Would also do a check on the sex offender registry. The agency will go to the resource's home to determine whether or not the home is suitable. That's usually called home finding. And then the resource would be expected to do some training, which is called MAP training, M-A-P-P.
What is MAP training?
It's basic parenting skills.
Well, that's perfect. And so I don't necessarily have to already be a parent to be considered to be a foster parent if I know the child.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so that's really good news for the kid. So what is the role of the foster care agency in this process?
So what surprised a lot of people is just how much power the agency has. The agency is likely to have the ability to set a schedule for when the parent visits the child. If the court has already imposed a schedule, then the agency will have to follow the schedule imposed by the court. But the agency is likely to have that power, have that discretion. In many cases, the court will give the agency the discretion, meaning the power to determine who's allowed to supervise visits between the biological parent and the child. The foster care agency can decide where the child goes to school, even though typically they will either have the child stay in the school where the child was before, or also be placed in the zone school of the foster home. The agency has control over the child's medical care. So if the child goes to therapy, the agency will often expect the child to see a therapist that works for the agency. So even though the child is living with the foster parent, it's actually the agency that has decision-making authority regarding the child.
Wow, that is really interesting. So is it like very often that they end up adopting the child after all of this?
Yeah. Well, in order for the foster parent to adopt the child, then the biological parent's rights would have to be terminated, and that's a whole other proceeding. So, in cases where it's not likely the biological parent will be able to get the child back, if there is what's called a cause of action, meaning a reason to do it, the agency will file a termination of parental rights proceeding. So typically the causes of action are abandonment, which means that the parents have not had any contact with the child, not provided any financial support for at least 6 months. Permanent neglect, which means 12 consecutive months or 15 out of the most recent 22 months where the parents, in spite of the diligent efforts of the agency, has failed to plan for the child's future. It could also be mental illness or mental retardation that is unlikely to be cured in such a way. I don't want to say cured, but helped in such a way to the point where a parent is likely for the foreseeable future to be able to care for the child. And it could also be severe sexual abuse or severe repeated physical abuse. So those are the ways that a parent's rights can be terminated. And if the agency wins the termination of parental rights proceeding, then the agency will have the power to place the child for adoption. And typically they do place the child for adoption with the foster parent.
Really? Well, those are all very scary situations for a child. And I'm sure that if they do come into foster care, that, there are some issues that need to be worked out in therapy for some of the things that you mentioned. And, it could be quite an undertaking. So one of the questions that I'd like to ask is there a period where I can wait and see what happens with the child before stepping up to become a foster parent, or are they just going to be placed with somebody right away? And any other information on that you want to convey?
So that is a mistake that I see happen a lot, is where a relative says, let's wait and see because this should all be taken care of soon, and that my niece or my daughter or my son will get the child back. But that's a huge mistake. Once the child's placed into foster care, if you're a relative who wants to keep the child, you need to step in right away. So when the child is removed, then the child will have to go somewhere. And if there's no relative available who's suitable, then the child will be placed with a stranger. Now, it happens pretty often that a relative says, let's wait and see. The child is placed with a stranger, and then 6 months, a year down the line, when the parent still hasn't gotten the child back, the relative comes and says, well, I want the child with me. But then at that point, the way the court's going to see it is, well, the child is already with this other family, so no, I'm not going to place the child with the relative now. Can you hear me?
There was just a little bit of a period there when you were talking about after they went into foster care with a stranger for a 6-month period. I'm not sure what happened with the connection there, but maybe just tell us that one part you were talking about where the parents come in later, the relative. Oh, hold on a sec. Have you muted yourself? Hold on a sec. Wait, Joe. You just were muted for a second. Now try to say something.
Hello?
Yep, there you are. You're back.
Okay.
I don't know. That was crazy.
I think that it was my Wi-Fi, actually. Something happened.
Okay, well, you're back on live, so if you just pick up from
Sure.
6, if they go with if they do end up saying, oh, let's wait and see, the scenario is that now the child goes with a stranger for 6 months to a year, and then the relative steps in. So
what often happens is that if a relative then says, well, now I want the child with me, then the court will say, well, the child is already doing so well with this relative, with this non-relative, so why would I disturb the child's stability? And then at that point, it's very, very difficult to get the child. So if a child's put in foster care, even if you think it will be taken care of, then it's really important that you step in right away.
Well, that's kind of sad that would happen. But obviously they want consistency for the child, and if the child hasn't had consistency up until now, and they've had some of these horrible things that you mentioned happen to them, I can see where the agency would say, you know what, let's just let it ride over there, and I guess you'd have to then fight it out in court to get the kid later on. Is that right?
You would, but you're very likely to lose. So that's why it's really important to step in right away.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's really great advice. And if you're doing this sort of thing, even if you have questions about it, and what are the benefits of having an attorney to help you?
Well, I think it's a very scary process. It's a very confusing process. A lot of people expect that the court will always side with the relative because, from their point of view, well, the child has this great family. Why would you take the child away from this family? And it's not always that simple. People are surprised about that. So it's a lot easier to win if you have somebody by your side who's familiar with the system.
Absolutely. And then, when things come up, you have someone that's been in court every single day, working on these kinds of issues, and they've seen a lot of different scenarios, and they know a lot of little pieces of the law. Now, I know you and I have spoken so many times about little quirky laws that even just New York has, that, it's just really great that you have so much experience. I wonder if you have, not necessarily a quirky story, but any interesting tidbits or stories that you want to tell about this particular part of family law.
Well, what inspired me to do this topic this week is a case that I'm working on right now. It's a child with very serious medical needs. The mother was accused of not providing for them. And fortunately for her, she really has a wonderful family. And I'm working with the grandmother, and the child is actually being placed with the grandfather, who the family has a very good relationship with because of some things that have come up in the case. But it's looking like it's going to be, as stable for the child as it could possibly be. She'll be able to stay in the same school that she was going to, go to her activities. She's going to have a support system around her. And even last week, it was looking unfortunately, the child, until recently, was in the hospital. And it was looking like this poor teenager who's already been through so much was likely to go to what's called the Children's Center, which is a place where they put children who have nowhere to go and who are in foster care. And it's scandal-ridden. It's not a very good place. There have been newspaper articles about the horrible things that happened there. And with the help of the attorneys, the family was able to avoid that. And it's looking like things are working out for the child.
Wow. That's really great. And I mean, those are the kinds of cases that you really have to feel good about. I mean, I know you make a big difference in a lot of people's lives and a lot of children's lives, and especially something like this where a kid might have to go somewhere for no reason of their own, that would really, after everything they've gone through, make things exponentially worse. So I'm really happy that you're able to help that particular child out, and all of the children in this case. So it's really great to hear a great story like that. So, well, I want to thank you very much. If we haven't, is there anything that you think we've missed in today's topic that you'd like to mention before we go today?
Well, the last thing actually would be that if you or a relative wants to take a child who's been removed from a child's home, there is also another option outside of foster care, which is that you can have what's called direct placement. Ultimately, it's up to the court to decide whether or not to place the child directly with a relative. But for parents that do not want, for relatives, I should say, that do not want to be foster parents but still want to care for a child until the child can be returned to the care of the parents, then that is also another option, is what's called the direct placement, where the child is placed with the relative but not in a foster care situation.
So that just means the difference between the fostering and then the direct placement is that the foster placement company is not in charge of the decisions then. Is that right?
That's true. And also one thing that the resource would lose out on is foster care funds. But there are a lot of people that prefer to forego the foster care funds so that this way they don't have to deal with the foster care agency.
That's fantastic. That's great news. And I'm sure that that's going to really help a lot of people that are, they see a family member in a bad situation. They want to help the children out. I think this is awesome. But just remember that it's going to be a lot easier if you have a great attorney like Attorney Joseph Nivin on your side. So please feel free to give him a call and his team if you have any questions and you want to see what your unique situation, what some of the options would be for you. I'm sure that they are all ready and waiting to serve you with a smile in that area. And thank you so much for coming on again today. Joe, we really appreciate all the information, and we can't wait to hear from you next week.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. So you just hold on. We're going to chat for a second after, and I want everyone else to have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to be back at 4:30 with another interview. So we'll see everyone back in a little bit. All right. Thank you so much.